If you have ever thrown a punch and felt like it had no real power behind it, this video is going to change that for you today. There is one mechanical flaw that nearly every beginner, intermediate, and even experienced boxer carries in their technique, and once you understand it and fix it, your punching power will feel completely different the very next time your fist connects with a bag or a pad. We are going to walk through a simple 3-step foundation first, because without it, the secret technique at the end of this video will not work the way it is supposed to. Stay with it all the way through, because that 4th step is where everything changes. Now, a quick honest note before we get into it, you are probably not going to punch harder than a professional heavyweight after watching one video, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. But you will surprise yourself. This technique works whether you are a boxer, a kickboxer, a mixed martial artist, or someone who just wants to be able to protect themselves in a difficult situation. The mechanics of generating force in a punch are universal, and once you have them, they apply to every single punch you throw. Here's the problem that almost every person who learns to punch runs into. They think punching power comes from the arm. It is an understandable assumption because the arm is what makes contact. The arm is what you see throwing the punch, and when you watch someone get knocked out, it looks like a fast, hard arm. But the arm is actually the last thing that matters when it comes to generating real power. Think about a javelin thrower or a shot put athlete. The arm releases the object, but almost all of the force that sends it flying comes from the legs, the hips, and the rotation of the entire body. The arm is simply the final link in a chain of movement that starts at the ground. Punching works in exactly the same way. The arm delivers the punch, but the power that makes it hurt comes from somewhere else entirely. This is why you can have a large, muscular person who throws weak punches and a smaller, leaner fighter who puts much bigger people on the floor. Arm size has very little to do with it. Mechanics have everything to do with it. And the good news is that mechanics are something you can learn and apply immediately. Before we get to the main technique that ties all of this together, you need to understand 3 foundational principles. Every punch needs to carry your body weight with it. This sounds simple, but the way most people punch, they are throwing their arm at a target while their body stays relatively still. That is the equivalent of trying to swing a hammer while keeping your shoulder frozen in place. You get some movement, but you lose most of the potential force. When you throw a punch, your weight should shift forward slightly into the punch, not dramatically like you're falling, but with intention. Your back heel should begin to lift as your weight transfers through your front foot. The entire mass of your body is now loading itself behind that single point of contact. A 170-pound person throwing their full body weight into a punch is a completely different event than a 170-pound person just swinging their arm. The target feels the difference immediately. Practice this in slow motion first. Stand in your fighting stance, throw a slow cross, and feel whether your weight is shifting forward into it or whether your upper body is disconnected from your lower body. If your feet are not moving at all when you punch, you are leaving most of your power on the table. Once your weight is transferring forward, the hips need to rotate sharply in the direction of the punch. This is where the real force multiplier lies. The hips are the largest muscle group involved in punching, and when they fire through a punch with full rotation, they generate a level of torque that the arm simply cannot produce on its own. Watch any elite boxer in slow motion and you will see this rotation clearly. When Mike Tyson threw his right hand, his left hip snapped backwards as his right hip drove forward, creating a full body rotation that transferred directly into his fist. The same thing is visible in Manny Pacquiao, in Canelo Alvarez, in every fighter who has ever been known for serious punching power. The hip rotation is always there. It is not optional, it is the engine. On every punch you throw, you want to feel your hips turning over. If your hips are square to your target when your fist lands, the punch is weak by definition. If your hips have rotated through the target, by the time your fist connects, you are accessing a completely different level of force. Pair this with your weight transfer from step 1 and you already have a noticeably heavier punch than you started with. But we are not done. This step surprises people, but it is supported by decades of sports science research. When you exhale sharply at the moment of impact, your core muscles contract reflexively, creating a rigid column through your torso that channels force more efficiently from your lower body through to your fist. Every professional boxer does this instinctively. It is why you hear that sharp exhale sound on every punch in a professional bout. The sound itself is not the point, the core contraction is the point, and it happens naturally when you exhale with intent. Try throwing a hard punch while holding your breath versus exhaling through it, and you will feel the difference in how the punch lands. The second part of this step is to stay relaxed everywhere that does not need to be tight. A tense arm before impact slows the punch down and reduces power. You want your arm loose and fast on the way to the target, then tight and rigid the moment of contact. This is called the snap, and it is what separates punches that push from punches that crack. Speed through the air, contraction on impact. Now, if you want a free breakdown of the full kinetic chain with detailed drills, you can take straight to the gym. The link is in the description below. Go grab that now and come back. It costs you nothing, and it will give you a full training structure to build everything we are covering in this video into actual muscle memory. Here's the technique that nobody teaches in beginner classes and that most intermediate boxers have never been explicitly shown, even though every elite fighter in history has used it. It is the rear foot pivot, and it is the ignition switch for everything else we have covered. When you throw a punch, especially your cross or any rear hand strike, your back foot needs to pivot on the ball of the foot in the direction of the punch. That pivot is what physically enables your hips to rotate fully. Without it, your hip rotation is limited by the position of your back leg. With it, your entire lower body can fire through the punch without restriction. Here is why this is the thing that changes your punching immediately. You can understand weight transfer and hip rotation intellectually, but if your back foot is planted flat and still, your body literally cannot complete the rotation required to generate maximum force. The pivot is the mechanical unlock. It is the reason two people can understand the same concepts and have completely different power levels. The one with the pivot is accessing the full kinetic chain. The one without it is not. The pivot happens naturally when you let it. And the reason most people have trained it out of themselves is because early in their development, they were told to stay balanced and keep their feet planted, which is good advice for defense, but the opposite of what you want when generating maximum offensive power. For the rear foot pivot to work, you have to accept that you will be slightly off balance for a fraction of a second as the punch lands. Elite fighters do this constantly. That brief imbalance is the cost of hitting hard, and it is worth it. Go try this right now if you have access to a heavy bag or even open air. Throw a cross without any rear foot pivot first, and then throw the same cross while letting your back foot turn in on the ball of the foot as your hip rotates. The second punch will feel different, heavier, more complete. That is the full kinetic chain firing the way it is supposed to. The pivot will feel unnatural at first if you have been punching without it for any length of time. Your brain has built a motor pattern that excludes it, and you will need to override that pattern through deliberate repetition. The fastest way to do this is shadow boxing in slow motion with full focus on the footwork. Throw your punches at about 20% speed and make sure every rear hand strike includes the pivot before you speed anything up. Once the movement starts to feel natural at slow speed, move to the heavy bag and throw single punches at medium power, focusing only on the pivot and the hip rotation. Do not try to throw hard yet, just let the mechanics develop. After 2 or 3 sessions of this focused work, you can start throwing with intent and the mechanics will begin to carry the power for you automatically. The most common mistake people make when learning the pivot is turning it into a lunge. The pivot is controlled and contained on the ball of the rear foot. It is not a full step, and it is not a weight shift so dramatic that you fall forward. Keep it sharp and tight, and the power will be there without sacrificing your balance. So here's what the full kinetic chain looks like when all 4 elements are working together. You load your rear foot, you initiate the punch with a forward weight shift, your rear foot pivots on the ball, your hips rotate sharply through the target, your core contracts with a sharp exhale on impact, and your arm delivers all of that accumulated force to a single point of contact. Nothing is wasted. Everything moves in the same direction at the same moment. That is maximum punching power, and now you know how to build it. The fighters you watch and admire are not just gifted. They have trained these mechanics until they are completely automatic, and there is no reason you cannot do the same thing. It starts with understanding what is actually happening when a punch lands hard, and then building it deliberately 1 rep at a time. Hit the like button and subscribe.